In the shadowed depths of Oak Ridge Forest, where sunlight filters through ancient branches, the woman they call the Woods Woman lives alone. Townspeople whisper about her. Some say witch, others say widow, but all give her cabin a wide berth. For 15 years, she's existed in solitude, finding peace in the rhythms of nature that humans cannot hear. Until that rainy April morning when she discovers him, a forest ranger, barely breathing, dumped beside Widow's Creek like unwanted refuse. His uniform torn, his face bloodied. In her younger days, she might have left him there. The town had made their feelings clear about her kind. But something in his broken form calls to her. She drags him to her cabin, not knowing his secrets will unearth her own. What dark forces would leave a protector of the forest to die? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The firelight flickered across the stranger's battered face as Eleanor, Ellie to no one but herself these days, wrung out the cloth in the wooden basin. Blood tinged the water pink. She'd done what she could to clean his wounds, applying poultices of yarrow to stop the bleeding and willow bark to bring down his fever. Now it was up to him to find the will to live. Ellie settled into her chair, worn smooth from 15 years of use, and studied the man. His ranger uniform, once forest green, was caked with mud and torn in several places. Not from branches, as one might expect from a fall. These were deliberate cuts. Someone had wanted information from this man. She rose stiffly. The damp April air always aggravated her joints, and moved to the shelf where her wooden medicine box sat. Fingers that had once delicately handled laboratory equipment now sorted through jars of dried herbs with practiced efficiency. The labels, written in a precise hand that betrayed her scientific background, were mostly for show. Ellie knew each plant by scent, by texture, by the very energy it carried. "Who did this to you?" she murmured, not expecting an answer from the unconscious man. A gust of wind rattled the cabin's windows, sending a shower of raindrops against the glass. The storm was worsening. Ellie added another log to the fire and sat back down, reaching for her journal. For years, these pages had been her only confidant, filled with observations of seasonal changes, plant cycles, animal migrations. The daily minutiae of a woman who had chosen the forest over human company. She'd had another life once. Dr. Eleanor Harmon, respected botanist, university professor, pioneer in plant-based pharmaceuticals, until 15 years ago, when everything changed. When they took her reputation, her career, her place in the community, all because she had discovered something she shouldn't have. The ranger moaned, his head turning fitfully on the pillow. Ellie leaned forward, noting the rapid movement beneath his eyelids. Dreams or nightmares, she couldn't tell. His breathing was still shallow, but steadier than when she'd found him by Widow's Creek, half submerged and barely alive. She examined his body more carefully now that she'd cleaned him up. Beyond the obvious injuries, cracked ribs, concussion, multiple lacerations, there were other marks that troubled her. Circular burns on his forearms, methodical, evenly spaced, and strange ligature marks on his wrists that spoke of restraint. This was no accident. No animal attack or fall down a ravine. This man had been interrogated. As Ellie applied fresh herbs to his wounds, she noticed a small tattoo on his inner wrist, partially hidden by bruising. A compass rose with what looked like coordinates inscribed in tiny numbers. Her curiosity, dormant for so long, stirred uncomfortably. "What did you find out there?" she whispered. Through the night, she monitored his fever, replacing cooling cloths and administering tinctures when he seemed able to swallow. Near dawn, his temperature broke and he fell into a deeper, healing sleep. Ellie moved to the window, watching the first grey light filter through the trees. The ranger station would be missing him by now. They'd send search parties. They'd comb the forest, her forest. For 15 years, she'd managed to avoid rangers and hikers alike, becoming something between a ghost and a legend to the people of Oak Ridge Town. The crazy woman who lived in the woods. The witch who poisoned the mayor's son. Now she had invited trouble into her sanctuary. The ranger stirred again, his parched lips forming words she couldn't make out. Then clearly, northeast quadrant? The lodge. Ellie tensed. The northeast quadrant was the most remote section of the forest, where even the rangers rarely ventured. And the lodge, that could only mean one thing. The old hunting cabin that belonged to Mayor Harrington's family. The same Harringtons who had driven her from town all those years ago. She made her decision then. Once the man was stable enough, she would take him back to the edge of the forest. Leave him where he could be found. Wash her hands of whatever trouble followed him. But deep down, Ellie knew it wouldn't be that simple. The forest had delivered this broken man to her doorstep for a reason. And despite her best efforts to sever ties with the world of men, some bonds could never be truly broken, like her oath as a healer, or her scientist's need to uncover the truth. That night, as the ranger's fever raged again, he clutched at her arm with surprising strength. His eyes, open but unseeing, locked onto her face. "They're killing it," he gasped. "The whole forest. For money. You have to help me." Then he slipped back into unconsciousness, leaving Ellie alone with words that echoed too closely with the secrets of her own past. Morning light spilled through the cabin windows as the ranger's eyes fluttered open. He jerked upright, then immediately fell back with a groan, hand clutching his ribs. Ellie moved swiftly to his side. "Easy," she said, her voice rusty from disuse. "3 broken ribs, concussion, you've lost blood." The man's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the bookshelves lined with field guides and scientific journals, the worn furniture. Finally his gaze settled on Ellie. "Who? Where am I?" His voice was raspy, dehydrated. Ellie poured water from her old canteen into a cup and held it to his lips. "You're safe. For now." He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. When he finished, his eyes were clearer, more focused. "Who are you?" "Someone who found you half dead by Widow's Creek," Ellie replied, setting the canteen aside. "You've been unconscious for 2 days." The ranger attempted to sit up again, more slowly this time. Ellie supported his back, noting the tension in his muscles, the way he scanned the room for exits despite his weakness. "A man accustomed to danger," Daniel, he said after a moment. "Daniel Mercer, Forest Service. 5 years." He spoke in clipped sentences, conserving energy. "And you are?" Ellie hesitated. It had been so long since she'd introduced herself to anyone. "I live in the forest," she said finally. "That's enough for now." Daniel nodded, seeming to accept this non-answer. His hand moved instinctively to his belt, finding nothing. "Your badge is on the table," Ellie said. "Your gun is elsewhere, safe." He relaxed slightly at this, then winced as the movement jarred his ribs. "The men who did this, are they looking for you?" Ellie interrupted, her voice sharp. "Should I expect company?" Daniel closed his eyes, his forehead furrowing with the effort of remembering. "I was investigating something in the northeast quadrant. Restricted area." His eyes snapped open. "My notebook." "Did you find a notebook?" Ellie crossed to the shelf and retrieved the water-damaged item. "It was in your jacket. Most of it's ruined." She handed it to him, watching as he carefully peeled apart the soggy pages. Most of the ink had run, creating abstract blue and black patterns across the paper. Daniel's expression fell. "Coordinates," he murmured. "Evidence." "All gone." "Not quite all," Ellie said. She went to the hearth where several pages were spread out to dry. "I managed to save these. The writing's faint, but readable in places." Daniel took the pages with shaking hands. On one, the words "illegal" and "samples" were visible, along with partial coordinates. On another, a rough sketch of what looked like a building layout. "You've done this before," Daniel observed, looking at Ellie with new interest. "Salvaged, damaged documents," Ellie's expression shuttered. In another life, a burst of birdsong outside the window diverted their attention. Ellie moved to look out, her body language instantly alert. "Warblers are agitated," she murmured. "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. "Someone's coming." Ellie moved efficiently around the cabin, gathering the ranger's belongings and tucking them out of sight. "Stay quiet." She slipped outside, closing the door silently behind her. Daniel tried to rise from the bed but fell back, his strength failing him. Through the window, he could see Ellie vanish into the undergrowth like a shadow. Minutes passed. The cabin creaked and settled around him. From somewhere distant came the sound of voices, then silence. Daniel's hand crept under his pillow, searching for a weapon, finding nothing. When Ellie reappeared, she was carrying an armful of fresh plants. Her expression was grim. 2 rangers. "Calling your name?" "Acting like they're searching." "Acting," Daniel repeated. "If you're genuinely looking for someone, you don't avoid the most obvious places to look," Ellie said flatly. "They're putting on a show." Daniel's face paled. "Did you recognize them?" One was older, grey hair, captain's stripes. The other younger, red-haired. "Preston and Collins," Daniel whispered, his voice hollow. "My captain and partner." Ellie set down her plants and studied him. "Your own people did this to you?" Daniel struggled to sit up again, succeeding this time despite the pain. "Not just them. It goes higher. The mayor, corporate interest," his voice faltered. "I found something in the northeast quadrant, something they're willing to kill for. And what makes you think I care about any of this?" Ellie asked. Though something in her eyes had changed at the mention of the mayor, Daniel met her gaze steadily. "Because whoever you are, you didn't leave me to die when you could have. And because—" He glanced at the bookshelves lined with botanical texts, at the carefully labeled specimens. "I think you already know what they're doing out there." A heavy silence filled the cabin. Outside, a distant call echoed through the trees. Rangers pretending to search for a man they had left for dead. "Tell me," Ellie said finally, sitting down across from him, "exactly what you found in the northeast quadrant." 3 days passed, with no sign of the search parties returning. Daniel's strength improved incrementally, allowing him to sit at Ellie's small table for meals of rabbit stew and wild greens. On the 4th morning, as dawn broke through a misty rain, Ellie's head snapped up from where she was grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. "What is it?" Daniel asked, recognizing the now familiar alertness in her posture. "Someone's coming." "Multiple people." She moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 5 of them armed." Daniel struggled to his feet, pain flashing across his features. "Let me see." Together they watched as the search party moved through the trees, more methodically this time. At the front walked Captain Preston, his silver hair visible beneath his ranger hat. Behind him, 4 others, including Daniel's partner Collins, spread out in standard search formation. "They're taking it seriously now," Daniel murmured. "Are they?" Ellie's voice was skeptical. "Look at their path." Daniel observed for a moment before understanding dawned. "They're avoiding the creek basin, where they'd most likely find evidence, or a body," Ellie finished. "They're searching where they know they won't find anything." A humorless smile touched Daniel's lips. "Preston's too smart to make that mistake accidentally. What happens if they find you alive?" Ellie asked quietly. Daniel's expression hardened. "Nothing good." Ellie moved swiftly around the cabin, gathering supplies into a small pack. "There's a root cellar, hidden entrance under the rug. If they come, that's where you go." Daniel nodded, his breathing labored from standing too long. "And you?" "I know how to make people turn around before they reach my doorstep." She slid a hunting knife into her belt. Daniel's eyes widened. "You won't kill them?" Ellie laughed, a sound with no warmth. "No, but fear works better than force. These woods have a reputation. I'd make sure it stays that way." She handed him a cup of steaming liquid. "Drink this. It will dull the pain without clouding your mind." Daniel hesitated only briefly before drinking. The bitter taste made him grimace. "I should tell you," he said, setting down the empty cup, "about what I found." Ellie paused in her preparations, studying his face. "I'm listening." "Illegal logging in the northeast quadrant. But that's just the surface." His voice lowered. "They're harvesting rare plants, medicinal species. Some I couldn't even identify." Something flickered in Ellie's eyes. Recognition, anger. Preston mentioned a company. Nexus Pharmaceuticals. "They're processing the plants for drug development." Daniel leaned forward. "The operation is officially sanctioned by the town council, but the permits don't match what's happening. They're taking protected species, destroying habitats. And this surprised you?" Ellie's voice was bitter. The town's been dying for years. Nexus offered money, jobs. You know about this, Daniel said. Not a question. Ellie turned away, but her shoulders remained rigid. I know how Oak Ridge works. How money speaks louder than law. A twig snapped outside, closer than before. Both froze, listening intently. Tell me why they tried to kill you, Ellie whispered. Because I documented everything. Species, locations, the destruction. Evidence that could shut down the whole operation. Daniel's voice hardened. And because I learned that the preliminary harvests started 15 years ago under the previous mayor. Tests to see if the plants had pharmaceutical potential. Ellie's hand went to her throat, fingers closing around something beneath her shirt. Slowly, she pulled out a silver locket on a chain. 15 years, she echoed. The search party's voices carried through the trees now, close enough to distinguish words. Orders being given. Branches breaking underfoot. They'll be here in 10 minutes, Ellie said, tucking the locket away again. Get to the cellar, but Daniel remained seated. You know more than you're saying. Ellie met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate movements, she opened the locket and handed it to him. Inside was a small photograph of a young woman with Ellie's eyes, her face bright with youth and promise. My daughter, Ellie said softly. She died 15 years ago. The same year, I was driven from town for allegedly poisoning the mayor's son with a toxic plant extract. A convenient scapegoat when the boy had an unusual reaction to something he was never supposed to be exposed to. Understanding dawned on Daniel's face. The early tests. They needed someone to blame when something went wrong. Ellie nodded once. I lost everything that year. My daughter to childbirth complications. My reputation, my work, my place in society. Her voice grew hard as stone. I will not let them destroy what I have left. The voices outside grew louder. Cellar, Ellie commanded. Now, the search party passed within 50 yards of the cabin. Ellie watched from behind a massive oak as Captain Preston led his men in a deliberately misdirected search pattern. When they finally retreated, the afternoon sun was lowering in the sky. She waited another hour before returning to the cabin. Daniel emerged from the root cellar, relief evident on his face. They're gone? For now. Ellie stoked the fire, which had died down during her absence. They'll be back. Daniel settled at the table, moving with less pain than before. We need to talk about what happens next. Ellie placed a pot of stew over the flames. Nothing happens next. You heal, you leave. I continue as I was. It's not that simple, Daniel said quietly. What I discovered affects you too. I've survived 15 years without your help, Ranger, and how many more can the forest survive? Daniel counted. The northeast quadrant is just the beginning. Once they've stripped it, they'll move south. Toward your home, Ellie's hands stilled. She turned to face him, expression guarded. Explain. Daniel took a deep breath. Nexus Pharmaceuticals obtained permits for botanical research and limited sampling in the northeast quadrant. What they're actually doing is systematic extraction, clear-cutting sections to access undergrowth, harvesting entire colonies of rare plants. For what purpose? A new drug, something revolutionary for pain management without addiction potential. The key compound comes from a plant that only grows in this forest. Daniel leaned forward. The market potential is billions, enough to make destroying a forest seem like acceptable collateral damage. Ellie moved to a shelf and withdrew a worn leather journal. She laid it open before Daniel, revealing pages of detailed botanical illustrations, pressed specimens, and precise notations. Is this what they're looking for? She pointed to a delicate purple flower with distinctive star-shaped petals. Daniel's eyes widened. Yes, that's it. Stellaria cyananthus. Blue starflower, Ellie translated. Extremely rare. Grows only in undisturbed forest with specific soil conditions. Her finger traced the illustration lovingly. I've documented its life cycle for 12 years. It has remarkable properties. You knew, Daniel said softly. Of course I knew. Ellie's voice held no emotion. I'm a botanist, Ranger, or I was. Before Oak Ridge decided I was a witch, Daniel studied the journal's pages with newfound respect. These notes are more comprehensive than anything in the scientific literature. The scientific literature doesn't spend 15 years in the forest, Ellie replied dryly. She flipped to another page. The blue starflower isn't the only medicinal plant they're destroying. There are dozens of species with untapped potential, all being bulldozed for a single profitable compound. Help me stop them, Daniel said simply. Ellie closed the journal. Why should I risk what little peace I've found? Because you care about this forest. Because what they did to you 15 years ago, they're doing again now. Because, Daniel hesitated, then continued more softly, because you're still Dr. Eleanor Harmon, whether you use the title or not. Ellie's expression hardened. That name means nothing anymore. It would, with your research backing my claims. Daniel gestured to the journal. This work could save the forest and expose Nexus's illegal operations. And what about Preston? Collins, the mayor? You think they'll just allow themselves to be exposed? Ellie shook her head. They tried to kill you once. They'll try again. Not if we're smart. Not if we gather enough evidence that it can't be buried. Daniel straightened, wincing slightly. I have a contact at the State Environmental Agency. Someone outside Oak Ridge's influence. Ellie remained silent, her hand resting protectively on the journal. I can't do it alone, Daniel admitted. I need your knowledge of the forest, your documentation, your testimony. About what happened 15 years ago. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across Ellie's face. Outside, a night bird called, the sound plaintive in the gathering darkness. Do you know what it's like, she said finally, to lose everything, to become a ghost in your own life? Daniel shook his head. No, then you can't understand what you're asking me to risk. She moved to the window, gazing out at her forest. This is all I have left. It won't be left for long if they continue, Daniel said gently. Even your sanctuary will eventually fall to their bulldozers. Ellie's shoulders slumped slightly, the first sign of vulnerability she had shown. When she turned back to face him, her eyes held a resolve that hadn't been there before. I'll show you something tomorrow, she said. Something that will either convince you we can win this fight or prove that it's already lost. Dawn broke with unusual clarity. The forest bathed in golden light. Ellie prepared for their journey methodically, packing a small leather satchel with water, dried meat and herbs. Daniel watched her efficient movements, noting how she checked and double-checked every item. How far are we going? He asked, testing his injured ribs with careful pressure. 2 hours, if you can manage it. Ellie glanced at him critically. We can rest when needed. I'll manage. Daniel straightened, hiding a wince. What is this place you're taking me to? Ellie paused in her preparations. A place no one else knows about. Not the rangers, not the townspeople. She handed him a walking stick. You'll understand when we get there. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, Ellie moving along barely visible trails with the confidence of long familiarity. Daniel followed, his breathing controlled and measured. Though still weakened, he moved with the disciplined endurance of someone accustomed to physical hardship. Your training, Ellie observed after an hour of steady progress. Military before ranger service? Daniel nodded. 4 years. Army Rangers, that explains the resilience. Most men would still be bedridden with your injuries. Most men haven't had your medicines, Daniel countered. What you did with those herbal compresses, I've never seen healing like that. A ghost of a smile touched Ellie's lips. Centuries of wisdom dismissed as folk remedies by pharmaceutical companies. Ironic that they're now destroying forests to find what traditional healers already knew. They stopped by a small stream to rest. Daniel drank deeply from the clear water, then asked the question that had been growing since their departure. Why did you stay? After the town turned on you, why not leave completely? Start over somewhere else. Ellie's gaze swept across the forest canopy before answering. I did leave. I traveled for 2 years. Appalachians, Rockies, coastal forests in Washington. Her voice softened with memory. But this forest called me back. It's where my daughter was born, where her ashes are scattered. And scientifically speaking, it's unique. The biodiversity here exists nowhere else. She rose, signaling the end of their rest. We should continue. We're close now. The terrain grew steeper, the trees older and more massive. They crested a ridge and descended into a valley untouched by trails. Ellie moved with increasing caution, checking certain landmarks only she could recognize. Finally, she stopped at a seemingly unremarkable rock face partially covered by vines. "Help me with this," she instructed. Together, they pulled aside the vegetation to reveal a narrow crevice. Ellie slipped through, gesturing for Daniel to follow. The passageway opened suddenly into a small, hidden valley, a perfect circle of green, surrounded by protective rock walls. At its center stood an ancient oak, its massive branches creating a natural cathedral. Daniel stopped, awestruck. "What is this place?" "The heart," Ellie said simply, "a microclimate unique to this forest. The conditions here, soil composition, humidity, light exposure, create an environment found nowhere else on the continent." She led him forward, and Daniel now saw what made the clearing truly remarkable. Flowers, hundreds of the blue star flowers, their delicate blossoms carpeting the ground in waves of purple-blue. "It's beautiful," he breathed. "It's more than beautiful. It's the source." Ellie knelt, gently touching one of the blossoms. "The plants they're harvesting in the northeast quadrant are just outliers, scattered colonies from seeds carried by wind and animals. This is the mother colony, the genetic wellspring." Daniel understood immediately. "If Nexus found this place, they'd strip it bare within a week." Ellie stood, brushing soil from her hands. "The compound thereafter is most concentrated here. Does anyone else know this place exists?" Ellie reached beneath her shirt and pulled out a small key hanging from a leather cord. "One other person did. My doctoral advisor, Professor Emerson. We discovered this valley together 20 years ago, documented it secretly, knowing what would happen if commercial interests learned of it." She walked to the base of the great oak, where Daniel now noticed a small metal box embedded in the roots, nearly invisible against the bark. Ellie inserted the key. "After I was driven from town, he continued our work in secret, sending me equipment, helping preserve my research." She opened the box, revealing a waterproof case containing papers and a small electronic device. "He died 3 years ago, heart attack while testifying against a logging company." Too convenient to be coincidence, Daniel examined the contents with careful hands. "Research data?" "Evidence," Ellie corrected. "Soil samples, DNA sequencing, chemical analysis. Proof that this ecosystem is unique enough to qualify for federal protection." She met his gaze steadily. "Everything we need to stop Nexus legally, if we can get it to the right people." "If," Daniel repeated, understanding the magnitude of the challenge. "And if we fail?" Ellie replaced the contents and locked the box. "Then at least I'll have tried. Better than hiding while they destroy everything." She touched the key around her neck. "I've been a ghost for 15 years. Perhaps it's time to haunt those who thought they'd buried me." The journey back to the cabin was made in contemplative silence, each lost in thought about the discovery and its implications. As they approached the clearing where Ellie's home stood, she raised her hand abruptly, signaling Daniel to stop. "Someone's been here," she whispered, pointing to barely perceptible disturbances in the undergrowth. They approached with caution, staying within the tree line. The cabin appeared undisturbed, but Ellie's experienced eyes noticed subtle signs. A branch moved from where she'd left it by the door. Footprints partially brushed away from the porch. "Wait here," she instructed, drawing her hunting knife. "Not a chance," Daniel replied, picking up a stout branch. "We go together." They circled the cabin once before approaching the door. Ellie entered first, knife ready, only to find the interior exactly as they'd left it. Almost. "The map," Daniel said, noticing the absence immediately. "Your forest survey map is gone." Ellie moved to the shelf, where she'd kept the hand-drawn map of the forest territories. In its place lay a ranger service patch, Collins' unit insignia. "A message," Daniel said grimly. "They know I'm alive, or suspect it," Ellie corrected. She examined the cabin carefully. "Nothing else taken. No traps left. This was just a warning and reconnaissance." She retrieved her worn compass from a hidden pocket and laid it on the table. Unlike standard compasses, this one had additional markings etched into its face, symbols and notations meaningful only to Ellie. "They have my map. But it won't help them much, she said. The important locations are marked in a code only I understand. She tapped the compass. The real map is here. Daniel examined the compass with newfound respect. Lever? Necessary? Ellie began gathering supplies with quick efficiency. They'll be back with more men. We need to move tonight. To where? I have a fallback shelter. Closer to the heart, but well hidden. She handed him a small pack. Take only what's essential. As Daniel packed medical supplies and food, Ellie retrieved her botanical journal and the evidence from the metal box. She wrapped them carefully in oilskin before adding them to her own pack. What's our plan? Daniel asked as darkness began to fall. Ellie considered the question while checking the edge of her knife. We need to document what's happening in the northeast quadrant. Get photographs, samples of the destruction. That's dangerous territory. Nexus has security patrols. You're not the only one who knows how to move unseen. Ellie's expression hardened. I've been avoiding Rangers for 15 years. I can handle private security. Daniel nodded, understanding the resolve behind her words. When do we start? Dawn. We'll move to the shelter tonight, rest, then head north. Ellie studied his face. Are you strong enough? I'm getting there. Daniel tested his ribs, finding the pain more manageable. Your medicines work wonders. Nature provides what we need if we know where to look. Ellie packed the last of her herbs. Something the people destroying the forest will never understand. They set out under cover of darkness, Ellie leading with her compass and an uncanny ability to navigate by night. The new shelter, when they reached it 3 hours later, proved to be a small cave concealed behind a waterfall. The entrance invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. Inside, basic supplies waited, dry wood, blankets, a small cache of preserved food. Ellie lit a carefully shielded lantern, revealing a space both secure and surprisingly comfortable. You've prepared for this, Daniel observed. I've learned to anticipate the worst from people. Ellie arranged the bedding. Rest. Tomorrow will demand all our strength. Morning arrived with a fine mist shrouding the forest. They ate quickly and departed, heading northeast. Ellie set a careful pace, balancing the need for speed with Daniel's recovery and the necessity of moving undetected. By midday, they began to see the first signs of the operation, markers on trees, surveyor flags. Ellie's expression darkened with each indication of the forest's planned destruction. We're close, she whispered, as they crouched in dense undergrowth. Listen. The distant sound of machinery reached them, the growl of engines, the mechanical screech of metal on wood. Ellie gestured for Daniel to follow as she moved with practiced stealth toward the noise. They reached the edge of a clearing that hadn't existed 2 months earlier. What had once been old-growth forest was now a muddy expanse of stumps and tire tracks. At its center, heavy equipment moved methodically, clearing more trees, while workers in white protective suits harvested plants from the newly exposed forest floor. Daniel's face paled at the scale of destruction. Ellie's remained impassive, though her knuckles whitened around the compass she held like a talisman. Evidence, she said flatly. That's what we came for. She reached into her pack and withdrew something Daniel hadn't seen before, an old but well-maintained camera with a telephoto lens. Now, Ellie said, her voice steel beneath velvet, we become the hunters. From their concealed position at the edge of the clearing, Ellie methodically documented the destruction. Each click of the camera captured damning evidence. Protected trees marked for removal, workers harvesting endangered plants, security personnel with semi-automatic weapons patrolling the perimeter. There, Daniel whispered, pointing to a figure emerging from a prefabricated structure. That's James Harrington, the mayor. Ellie adjusted her lens, focusing on the well-dressed man, surveying the operation with proprietary satisfaction. Beside him stood Captain Preston, looking incongruous in his ranger uniform amid the devastation he was sworn to prevent. Perfect, she murmured, capturing the incriminating tableau. The mayor and head ranger overseeing illegal harvesting in a protected area. Keep shooting, Daniel urged. I recognize those containers they're loading the plants into, climate-controlled, used for transporting live specimens. For over an hour, they documented the operation from different vantage points. Ellie moved like a shadow through the underbrush, her knowledge of the terrain allowing them to circle the site without detection. Daniel followed, his military training complementing her forest craft. As they prepared to retreat, voices approached their position, a security patrol making rounds. Ellie pulled Daniel down behind a fallen log, both freezing as two armed men passed within yards of their hiding place. "Michaels wants another sweep of the South Ridge," one guard said. "Says he saw movement yesterday. Probably just a deer," the second replied. "Nobody comes out this far except us. Still, orders are orders. Nexus is paying top dollar for security. If anyone sees what's happening here..." Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the forest. Ellie and Daniel exchanged glances. A close call. "We have enough," Ellie whispered. "Let's go." They retreated carefully, taking a circuitous route to avoid patrols. By late afternoon, they reached the waterfall shelter, exhausted but successful. Daniel winced as he lowered himself onto a blanket, his still-healing ribs protesting the day's exertion. Ellie noticed immediately. "Let me check your bandages." As she examined his injuries, Daniel studied her face, the concentration in her eyes, the competent movements of her hands. The lines etched by years of solitude and hardship. "They did this to you," he said suddenly. "The same people. 15 years ago." Ellie's hands stilled momentarily before continuing their work. "Yes, tell me what happened." "The full story." She finished rebandaging his ribs before responding. After a moment of consideration, she reached into her pack and removed a plastic sleeve containing yellowed newspaper clippings. "The official version," she said, handing them to Daniel. The headlines told a sensational story. "Local botanist accused of poisoning mayor's son. University researcher used child as test subject to whom. Dr. Harmon flees as evidence mounts." Daniel read through the articles with growing disgust. Character assassination. No proof, just allegations. Effective, though. Ellie's voice was clinically detached. "I was conducting legitimate research on forest medicinals. The university supported my work. I had federal grants. What actually happened to the mayor's son? Tyler Harrington, age 10. Severe allergic reaction to something he ingested." Ellie's eyes grew distant with memory. "I was called to help because of my botanical expertise. I stabilized him with an herbal remedy until the ambulance arrived. Saved his life, actually. Then how, 3 days later, the mayor's brother, James Harrington, our current mayor, announced that lab tests showed Tyler had ingested a toxic plant extract. The same compounds I was researching." Ellie's laugh held no humor. "Convenient timing. My research had just identified promising anti-inflammatory properties in the blue starflower." Daniel studied the clippings again, seeing them through new eyes. "They needed to discredit you before you published. Before your discoveries became public knowledge. I was too caught up in my daughter's health to see it coming. She was pregnant, complications..." Ellie's voice faltered briefly. "By the time I realized what was happening, the damage was done. My reputation destroyed, research confiscated. When Emily died in childbirth a month later, I had nothing left to lose. I disappeared into the forest." Daniel carefully returned the clippings to their protective sleeve. "And now they're harvesting the very plants you discovered. Ironic, isn't it?" Ellie's smile was bitter. "They'll make millions from my research while I live as a hermit." "Not anymore," Daniel said firmly. "These photos, combined with your original research and these news clippings, it's a complete narrative of corporate and political corruption spanning 15 years. Ellie took the sleeve of clippings, handling them with the care one might give to precious relics. "Evidence isn't enough. We need someone willing to use it. Someone beyond their influence. My mentor at the State Environmental Agency," Daniel suggested. "Martin Reeves. He's incorruptible, has federal connections. Can you contact him without alerting Preston?" Daniel considered. "Not directly, but there's someone who might help us. A journalist I worked with on a story about wildlife trafficking last year." Lisa Chen. She has contacts throughout the region. Journalists, Ellie said skeptically. The last journalist who came here wrote that I was a modern-day witch living in the haunted forest of Oakridge. Lisa's different. Environmental justice is her beat. She follows evidence, not sensationalism. Night was falling outside their hidden shelter, the waterfall's constant rhythm providing cover for their conversation. Ellie studied the camera in her hands, weighing options and risks. How would we reach her? She finally asked. Daniel smiled. That's the one piece of good luck we have. There's an old fire tower 10 miles northwest. Still has a functioning radio. If we can get there, I can call for help. Ellie nodded, decision made. We leave at first light. The fire tower stood like a skeletal sentinel against the morning sky, its weathered frame a testament to a time when human eyes, not satellites, watched over the forest. Ellie and Daniel approached cautiously, pausing at the tree line to survey the clearing for any sign of danger. Looks clear, Daniel murmured, studying the rusted metal stairs that spiraled up to the observation cabin. Hasn't been maintained in years, Ellie nodded, her eyes tracking the movement of birds around the tower. No human activity recently. Birds are too calm. They crossed the clearing quickly, Daniel testing each stair before allowing Ellie to follow. The metal groaned, but held their weight as they climbed. At the top, the small cabin offered a panoramic view of the forest stretching in all directions, the verdant south where Ellie's home stood, the scarred northeast where Nexus operated, and to the west, the distant rooftops of Oakridge town. Daniel moved directly to the radio equipment mounted on a dusty console. Surprisingly, when he flipped the power switch, indicator lights blinked to life. Solar backup system, he explained, seeing Ellie's questioning look. These towers were retrofitted before being decommissioned. Emergency use only. He adjusted dials with practiced hands, the radio emitting static as he searched for the correct frequency. Ellie stood watch at the windows, scanning the forest below with wary attention. Lisa Chen, Daniel spoke into the handset. Channel 16, emergency contact protocol. Ranger Mercer calling Lisa Chen, static answered him. He repeated the call twice more before a crackle of response came through. Daniel, a woman's voice breaking through the interference. Is that you? Everyone thinks you're dead. Not far off, he replied grimly. Lisa, I need your help. No ranger channels, no official contacts. This is bigger than we thought. Where are you? Can't say over this channel. Can you get to Oakridge? Alone and unnoticed? A pause. I'm actually in Millerville, just 20 miles south, working on a story about water contamination. I can be in Oakridge by evening. Perfect. There's a trailhead at the west end of town. Maplewood Trail. Can you be there at sunset? I'll be there. What's this about, Daniel? He glanced at Ellie, who gave a cautious nod. Corruption, illegal harvesting, attempted murder, mine, and a 15-year-old frame job that connects it all. Jesus, Lisa breathed. Are you safe? For now. Just come alone. Don't tell anyone. Understood? Sunset, Maplewood Trail. The radio went silent. Daniel powered down the equipment, leaving it as they'd found it. She'll come, he said with certainty. Lisa's solid. Ellie remained skeptical. If she's compromised. She's not, Daniel insisted. Environmental journalism is her life's mission. She's exposed operations like this before. They descended the tower carefully and began the long trek toward the western edge of the forest. Ellie set a route that kept them concealed while allowing good visibility of potential threats. By late afternoon, they reached a ridge overlooking Maplewood Trail. We'll wait here, Ellie decided. Good vantage point. Daniel nodded agreement, easing himself down with a barely suppressed wince. Though improving, his injuries still limited his endurance. They shared water and dried meat in silence, watching as the sun began its descent. First time back near town? Daniel asked softly. Ellie's expression remained neutral. I observe from a distance occasionally. Track changes. Nothing more. Do you miss it? Civilization? She considered the question longer than expected. I miss certain aspects, libraries, conversations about ideas, music. A shadow crossed her face. But the forest has its own civilization, its own music, different but no less rich. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and gold. Right on time, a solitary figure appeared on the trail below. A young Asian woman dressed in hiking gear, carrying a small backpack. She looked ordinary enough, but moved with the alert awareness of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. "That's Lisa," Daniel confirmed, raising a hand to signal. Ellie caught his arm. "Wait, let's make sure she's alone." They watched as Lisa reached the designated meeting point and casually surveyed her surroundings, then took out a water bottle and sat on a fallen log. After 5 minutes with no sign of anyone else, Ellie finally nodded. "I'll approach first," she said. "Stay hidden until I confirm it's safe." Daniel started to protest, then recognized the logic. "Be careful." Ellie moved like a ghost through the underbrush, circling behind Lisa's position. The journalist remained unaware of her approach until Ellie deliberately stepped on a twig. Lisa turned sharply, hand moving toward her pocket. "You're waiting for Daniel Mercer," Ellie said quietly, staying partially concealed. Lisa's eyes widened, her posture tense but controlled. "Who are you?" "Someone with a mutual interest in keeping him alive." Ellie studied the younger woman's face, searching for signs of deception. "Did you tell anyone you were coming?" "No," Lisa answered firmly. "Daniel said not to." "I didn't." Ellie stepped fully into view then. "I'm the person who found him, the one they call the Woods Woman." Recognition dawned in Lisa's eyes. "Dr. Eleanor Harmon? The botanist? You're supposed to be dead? Gone? Mad?" Ellie's smile held no warmth. "All convenient narratives for those who wanted my research buried." Daniel emerged from hiding, moving carefully down the slope. When Lisa saw him, her professional composure cracked momentarily. "My God, Daniel. What happened to you?" "My own people tried to kill me," he said simply. "Because I found out what they're really doing in the Northeast Quadrant." Lisa pulled a small recorder from her pocket. "Tell me everything." Night had fully descended by the time they finished sharing their evidence with Lisa. The journalist's recorder captured everything: Daniel's discovery of the illegal harvesting, the attack that nearly killed him, Ellie's 15-year-old story of false accusations, and their documentation of Mayor Harrington and Captain Preston overseeing the operation. "This is explosive," Lisa said, reviewing her notes by flashlight. "Corruption, conspiracy, attempted murder, spanning 15 years. Will your editor publish it?" Daniel asked. "With this evidence?" "Absolutely." Lisa's expression turned grave. "But there's a process. Fact-checking, legal review. It could take days, even with a rush." "We don't have days," Ellie said flatly. "They're accelerating the harvest. The Northeast Quadrant will be stripped within a week." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "I need to go into town. Gather additional corroboration. Town records, permits, business filings." "Too dangerous," Daniel objected. "If Preston or the mayor spot you, I know how to work undercover," Lisa assured him. "I'll pose as a travel writer researching historic small towns." "It's my standard cover." Ellie studied the younger woman, assessing. "What exactly would you look for?" "Official records. Town council minutes. Anything documenting the relationship between Oak Ridge and Nexus Pharmaceuticals." Lisa tapped her notebook. "Every conspiracy leaves a paper trail. People document even their crimes." Ellie exchanged glances with Daniel, an unspoken communication passing between them. "I have a contact in town," Ellie said reluctantly. "Someone who might help. Marion Blackwell, the town librarian." Daniel looked surprised. "You've maintained contact?" "Minimal. She leaves supplies at forest drop points occasionally. Never betrayed my location." Ellie's expression softened slightly. "She was my daughter's godmother. Never believed the accusations. Can we trust her?" Lisa asked directly. "As much as anyone," Ellie replied. "She has access to town records. The library archives, council minutes, local news, property transactions." Lisa made a decision. "I'll go tomorrow. Book a room at the local inn, establish my cover, then visit the library. Take this." Ellie removed something from her pocket, a small river stone polished smooth with a distinctive red streak. "Show it to Marion. She'll know it's from me." They made plans to meet again in 2 days at an abandoned hunter's cabin Ellie knew, marked on a rough map she drew for Lisa. As the journalist prepared to leave, she hesitated. "Dr. Harmon, Ellie, there's something you should know." Her expression was troubled. "They've declared Daniel officially dead. There was a funeral yesterday." Daniel stiffened. "A funeral?" "Captain Preston gave a moving eulogy about your dedication and sacrifice. Said you died in a tragic accident investigating poachers." Lisa's voice was bitter with irony. "The mayor announced a ranger station will be named in your honor." "Convenient," Ellie observed coldly. "The dead can't contradict official narratives." "It might work in our favor," Daniel said after a moment's thought. "If they believe I'm dead, they won't be looking for me." Lisa nodded. "I should go. Sunrise isn't far off." They parted ways, Lisa heading toward the main road, while Ellie led Daniel deeper into the forest, taking a circuitous route back to the waterfall shelter. Both were lost in thought, considering implications and next moves. "You trust her," Daniel observed as they walked. "Not a question. Trust is a luxury I abandoned 15 years ago," Ellie replied. "But I believe in pragmatic self-interest. This story could make her career." Dawn was breaking when they reached the shelter. Exhausted, Daniel immediately lay down while Ellie took first watch. As he drifted towards sleep, he noticed her removing a small object from her pack, a faded document in a protective sleeve. "What's that?" he asked drowsily. Ellie hesitated before answering. "Town council minutes from 15 years ago. Marion smuggled them to me shortly after I fled." She unfolded the papers carefully. "The meeting where they decided my fate. 7 council members voted unanimously to press charges against me for endangering Tyler Harrington." Unanimously. Daniel's fatigue momentarily forgotten. According to the official record, Ellie's finger traced a notation in the margin. But Marion marked the truth here. 2 members were absent that day, conveniently ill. 3 others were pressured by Mayor Harrington Sr., only 2 genuine votes against me. Daniel studied the document, noting coffee stains and penciled annotations. "This proves the conspiracy started back then." "It proves manipulation of official records," Ellie corrected. "One small thread in a larger tapestry of corruption. Does Lisa know about this?" "Not yet." Ellie carefully refolded the document. "It's my insurance. If she's compromised, if this all goes wrong—" She didn't finish the thought. Daniel understood. After 15 years of isolation, trust came difficult to Ellie. Each revelation was measured, calculated, a survival mechanism born of betrayal. "Get some rest," she said, turning toward the cave entrance. "Tomorrow, we need to gather more evidence from the harvesting site. Specific plants they're taking, equipment being used." But as Daniel drifted into sleep, he glimpsed something rarely seen on Ellie's face. A flicker of hope, quickly suppressed, but unmistakably there. For the first time in 15 years, she was fighting back, rather than simply surviving. Dawn broke with ominous clouds gathering on the horizon. Ellie studied the sky with a frown as she prepared a simple breakfast of foraged berries and the last of their dried meat. "Storm coming," she observed. "Big one." Daniel joined her at the cave entrance, his movements more fluid now, healing progressing well. "How long do we have?" "Hours, not days." She handed him a cup of herbal tea. "Changes our plans. We need to gather evidence from the northeast site before the rain washes everything away." They ate quickly and departed, Ellie setting a brisk pace through the forest. As they traveled, the wind picked up, bending treetops and carrying the scent of approaching rain. By mid-morning, they reached the ridge overlooking the harvesting operation. The site hummed with increased activity, more workers, additional equipment, a sense of urgency driving the operation. "They're accelerating," Daniel whispered as they observed from concealment. "Rushing to beat something. The storm, perhaps." Ellie focused her camera on workers loading plants into specialized containers. Or something else. A black SUV arrived, parking near the prefab buildings. Out stepped a woman in an expensive suit, clipboard in hand, accompanied by 2 men in laboratory coats. "Who's that?" Ellie asked, adjusting her zoom lens. Daniel's expression darkened. "Dr. Vanessa Mitchell, head of research at Nexus Pharmaceuticals. I recognize her from their website." Ellie captured several photos as the researcher inspected harvested plants, making notes and giving directions. The final authority arrives to oversee the operation personally. Significant. Means they're in the last phase, Daniel agreed. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. They circled the operation carefully, documenting from multiple angles, collecting samples of discarded plant material. The workers moved with hasty efficiency, clear-cutting additional sections of forest, while specialized teams extracted targeted plants from the newly exposed undergrowth. As they prepared to retreat, raised voices caught their attention. Near the main building, Mayor Harrington was engaged in a heated discussion with Dr. Mitchell. "Get closer," Daniel urged. "If we could record what they're saying." Ellie hesitated, calculating risks. Then, with a nod, she moved through the underbrush with silent expertise, positioning herself downwind and within earshot of the argument. Daniel followed, wincing as branches scraped his healing injuries. "Cannot afford delays," Dr. Mitchell was saying, her voice clipped with corporate authority. "The FDA approval process is already in motion. We need the full harvest completed before the end of the week." "My men are working as fast as possible," Harrington replied defensively. "But this storm system is not my concern, Mayor." The researcher checked her watch impatiently. "Our competitors are 18 months behind us on synthetic development. This window of opportunity is critical. What about the environmental impact report? The state agency is asking questions." Dr. Mitchell's laugh held no humor. "That's your department, isn't it? The same way your ranger service handles forest management?" A security radio crackled nearby. "Team 2 reports movement on the South Ridge. Possible wildlife or intruder." Ellie tensed, touching Daniel's arm in warning. They needed to move now. "Sweep the perimeter," ordered a security supervisor. "Groups of 3, standard protocol." Ellie and Daniel retreated silently, using the gathering winds to cover their movements. Dark clouds now dominated the sky, the air heavy with impending rain. They moved swiftly through the forest, Ellie leading them on an indirect route to confuse any pursuers. When they reached the waterfall shelter, Ellie's demeanor had changed. A cold determination had replaced her usual reserved caution. "We're out of time," she said, gathering their essential supplies. "They're in the final phase. Once they complete the harvest and process their samples, all evidence of what they're doing, what they've done, disappears." Daniel watched as she moved to a specific stone in the cave floor and pried it loose, revealing a small compartment beneath. From it, she withdrew an oilcloth bundle. "What's that?" he asked, though he recognized the distinctive shape. Ellie unwrapped the cloth, revealing a well-maintained Winchester rifle. "My grandfather's. He taught me to hunt when I was 12. "Ellie," Daniel's voice held warning, "that's not the way. It's not for them." She checked the mechanism with practiced hands. "It's protection. The stakes have changed. They're accelerating their timetable, which means we accelerate ours." She loaded the rifle with methodical precision, each movement betraying years of experience. "I've remained hidden for 15 years, Daniel. Watched as they gradually destroyed this forest. Told myself it wasn't my fight anymore." Lightning flashed outside, followed by the low rumble of thunder. The storm approached, mirroring the intensity in Ellie's eyes. "I was wrong," she continued, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. "This has always been my fight. I just stopped fighting." Daniel studied her, recognizing the transformation. The reclusive woodswoman was receding, revealing the determined scientist and advocate who had been buried beneath years of isolation and caution. "What are you proposing?" he asked carefully. "We don't wait for Lisa's article. We don't wait for official channels." Ellie's voice was steel. "Tonight, we go into Oak Ridge ourselves, find Marion, get access to the town records, gather irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy. And that's incredibly dangerous if you're recognized. After 15 years, unlikely." She secured her pack with efficient movements. "Besides, everyone loves a ghost story." Let's give Oakridge a real one. Rain began to fall outside, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. The storm had arrived, and with it, Ellie's resolve. "Are you with me?" she asked, extending her hand. Daniel took it without hesitation. All the way, the storm raged through the afternoon and into evening, transforming the forest into a chaotic symphony of wind and water. Ellie and Daniel used the time to prepare, reviewing maps of Oakridge and planning their approach. As darkness fell, the downpour eased to a steady rain, providing ideal cover for their mission. "The library will be closed by now," Ellie said, studying the town map she'd drawn from memory. "But Marion lives in the apartment above it, private entrance in the back alley." "How do we reach it without being seen?" Daniel asked, checking the waterproof wrapping on their evidence and camera. "Service road here." Ellie traced the route with her finger. "Used to be a delivery access. Runs behind the main street buildings. Minimal lighting, no residential views." They departed as night fully descended, moving through the forest with careful efficiency despite the slippery conditions. The rain-soaked journey took longer than expected, but the weather kept the forest empty of other travelers. When they reached the edge of town, Ellie paused, her expression momentarily vulnerable as she looked at the distant lights of Oakridge. For 15 years, she had only observed the town from afar, a ghost haunting its periphery. Now she was about to walk its streets again. "You okay?" Daniel asked softly. She nodded once, shoulders squaring. "Let's go." They skirted the main roads, keeping to shadows and alleyways. Oakridge, after dark, was largely deserted, the rain driving residents indoors. The service road behind, Main Street, was exactly as Ellie remembered, narrow, poorly lit, lined with dumpsters and delivery entrances. "There," she whispered, pointing to a modest staircase attached to a brick building. "Library's back entrance." They approached cautiously. At the foot of the stairs, Ellie hesitated again, 15 years of exile weighing on her. Then, with deliberate steps, she ascended and knocked softly on the door. Moments passed. Light footsteps approached from inside. The door opened a crack, revealing a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Yes?" The woman's voice was cautious. "The library's closed until—" She froze mid-sentence, eyes widening as she recognized the face before her. "Eleanor?" A whispered question, disbelief evident. "Hello, Marion," Ellie replied quietly. The door opened wider. "My God, it's really you." Marion's gaze shifted to Daniel, standing behind Ellie. "And you've brought— Is that Ranger Mercer? But he's supposed to be dead," Daniel finished. "Yes, that's the official story." Marion looked between them, processing rapidly. Without another word, she stepped back, gesturing them inside. "Quickly, before someone sees you." The apartment was small but comfortable, lined with bookshelves and houseplants. Marion led them through to a modest living room, closing curtains and switching on a single lamp. 15 years, she said finally, studying Ellie with a mixture of joy and sadness. 15 years of leaving supplies at drop points, never knowing if you'd found them. "If you were still alive." "I found them," Ellie said simply. "They helped. Thank you." Marion embraced her suddenly, the gesture bridging the long gulf of years. After a moment, Ellie returned the embrace, her usual reserve softening briefly. When they separated, Marion's expression turned serious. "You wouldn't come back without reason, especially not with him." She nodded toward Daniel. "What's happening?" Ellie placed her research journal on the table. "The past is repeating itself, Marion, but this time we have evidence." Over the next 30 minutes, they outlined everything: the illegal harvesting operation, the attack on Daniel, the connection to Ellie's past disgrace, and the accelerated timeline they'd discovered. Marion listened intently, her librarian's mind cataloguing details. When they finished, she rose without a word and retrieved a key from a drawer. "The town records," she said, holding up the key. Everything you need is in the library's archive room. Council minutes, permit applications, property transactions. I can get you in. It's too risky, Daniel objected. If you're caught helping us, I've spent 15 years watching this town trade its soul for economic promises that never materialize. Marion interrupted firmly, watching good people pushed out or silenced, keeping quiet while knowing what they did to Ellie. She straightened, her resolve evident. I'm done being a passive witness. Ellie opened her research journal, showing Marion the meticulous documentation of plant species, environmental changes, and medicinal properties she'd compiled over. 15 years of solitude, this is what they're destroying, she said softly. Not just trees and plants, knowledge, potential, future. Medicines that could help people without destroying the source. Marion examined a page where Ellie had sketched complex chemical structures beside a pressed blue starflower. You continued your research all this time. The forest became my laboratory, Ellie confirmed. Everything Nexus is discovering now, I documented years ago, but they're extracting and destroying. I was studying sustainable use. We need official records showing how this operation was approved, Daniel explained. The legal facade hiding illegal activities. Marion nodded decisively. Wait here. I'll check that the street is clear. She moved to the window, peering carefully through the curtains. The council had an emergency meeting today. Something about accelerating the revitalization project before the environmental review. Ellie and Daniel exchanged glances, another confirmation of the rushed timeline. Coast is clear, Marion announced. Follow me. The archive room is in the library basement. Everything we need is there. As they prepared to descend to the library, Ellie tucked her research journal securely into her pack. 15 years of solitary work was about to intersect with the official record of corruption. Together, they might finally provide justice long denied. The library after hours felt like a cathedral, silent, reverent, filled with knowledge sleeping between covers. Marion led them through the darkened main floor, their footsteps muffled by worn carpet. At the rear, a heavy oak door marked authorized personnel only blocked their path. Marion unlocked it with practiced ease. The town archives. Every official document since Oak Ridge's founding in 1887. They descended narrow stairs into a basement room, lined with metal shelving and filing cabinets. Marion flipped a switch, illuminating the space with subdued fluorescent light. Recent records there. She indicated a section of cabinets. Town council, zoning board, business permits. Last 5 years. Daniel moved immediately to the indicated area, while Ellie stood motionless, taking in her surroundings. This room represented the official narrative of Oak Ridge, the story that had excluded and vilified her. Ellie? Marion touched her arm gently. You all right? Fine, she replied automatically, shaking off the moment. Where would we find records about Nexus Pharmaceuticals? Corporate filings cabinet, Section B. Property acquisitions in Section D. Marion moved efficiently between shelves. I'll pull the council minutes from when they first approved the partnership. They worked methodically, gathering documents that traced the relationship between Oak Ridge and Nexus. What emerged was a carefully constructed facade of legitimacy, concealing increasingly questionable activities. Look at this. Daniel spread out a series of permits on a reading table. Initial approval 3 years ago for botanical research only. Limited environmental impact. No extraction. Marion nodded grimly. That's what the town was told. Scientific research bringing jobs and prestige. Then 6 months ago, Daniel continued, pointing to another document. Amended permits for sustainable harvesting of non-protected species. But what they're actually taking includes endangered plants, Ellie concluded. The blue starflower isn't even officially listed because its existence has been deliberately obscured. Marion pulled another folder from a cabinet. Here's the real smoking gun. Special meeting minutes, January 12th. Closed session. She spread the papers on the table. Nexus representatives requesting expedited permits for a limited time opportunity before FDA review processes. Ellie scanned the document quickly, her scientific mind noting key details. They told the council they needed to secure adequate raw materials before submitting final pharmaceutical approval applications. And the council approved unanimously, Daniel added, reading further, with a notation that forest management cooperation would be required. Ranger service involvement, Marion translated. Captain Preston's department. Ellie's expression hardened. Preston, always at the center of corruption. They continued gathering evidence, photographing documents, noting connections between seemingly legitimate approvals and the illegal reality they had witnessed. The paper trail revealed a town gradually compromising its principles for promised economic revival. "There's something else you should see," Marion said quietly, retrieving a file from a locked drawer. Minutes from last night's emergency meeting. The document outlined accelerated timelines, additional permits granted without public comment, and something labeled Phase 2 expansion. They're not stopping with the northeast quadrant, Daniel realized, tracing a map attached to the minutes. They're planning to clear the entire northern half of the forest. Ellie felt her breath catch. That includes the heart, the mother colony of blue starflowers. There's more. Marion turned the page. Nexus is building a processing facility on the edge of town, breaking ground next week. They're moving from harvesting to full production, the pieces aligned with devastating clarity. Nexus wasn't simply harvesting plants for research. They were establishing permanent infrastructure for ongoing extraction. The forest wouldn't just be damaged, it would be systematically destroyed. Footsteps echoed suddenly from above, followed by the main library door opening. All three froze, exchanging alarmed glances. "Someone's here," Marion whispered. "The archives are supposed to be locked." Daniel immediately began gathering the most crucial documents. Ellie moved silently to the stairs, listening intently. "Marion?" a male voice called. "You still here?" "Saw the lights on." Marion's face paled. "Mayor Harrington." Ellie's expression hardened. James Harrington, son of the mayor who had driven her from town, now mayor himself, and architect of the forest's destruction. "Hide," Marion urged them. "I'll get rid of him." "No." Ellie's voice was quiet but firm. "I've been hiding for 15 years. She straightened, a decision crystallizing. "It's time Oak Ridge faced its ghosts." Daniel moved to her side. "Ellie, think about this. If they realize you're alive, that I'm alive, they already suspect you survived," she countered. "And they've never stopped fearing my return. Why not use that fear?" Marion hesitated, torn between caution and recognition of Ellie's resolve. "What are you suggesting?" "Go upstairs," Ellie instructed. "Tell him you're working late. Keep him talking. I'll make my own introduction when the moment is right." The mayor's footsteps moved across the main floor above them. "Marion, everything all right?" Marion squeezed Ellie's hand briefly, a gesture of solidarity before ascending the stairs. They heard the archive door open and close as she emerged. "James, sorry. Just doing some late cataloging." Marion's voice was remarkably composed. "What brings you by at this hour?" In the basement, Ellie and Daniel continued gathering evidence, listening to the conversation above. When Marion skillfully steered the discussion toward the Nexus project, Ellie moved to the stairs. "It's time," she whispered to Daniel, her hand on the door handle. 15 years is long enough. The woodswoman was about to step back into the light. "The facility will change everything for Oak Ridge." Mayor Harrington's voice drifted down from above, smooth with practiced conviction. 200 jobs. Economic revival. Nexus is even funding a new community center. Quite a transformation, Marion replied neutrally. "The groundbreaking ceremony is tomorrow. 10 a.m. sharp. State representatives attending. Press coverage." Pride saturated Harrington's tone. "Finally putting Oak Ridge on the map for something other than declining population and closed businesses." Ellie paused at the top of the stairs, hand on the door handle. Daniel stood behind her, documents secured in his pack. They exchanged a glance. Tomorrow's ceremony represented both threat and opportunity. "I should let you finish your work," Harrington was saying. "Just wanted to drop off this invitation personally. Front row seat for our head librarian." Through the crack in the door, Ellie glimpsed him handing Marion an envelope. Something gleamed in his other hand, a miniature silver shovel, ceremonial keepsake for the groundbreaking. Custom made for town officials and key partners, he explained, noticing Marion's gaze. Quite impressive, aren't they? Nexus spared no expense. Ellie silently closed the door, turning to Daniel. We wait, she whispered. The confrontation can happen on our terms, not by accident. Daniel nodded agreement as they listened to Harrington's departing footsteps, followed by the main library door closing. Moments later, Marion returned to the archive room. That was close, she breathed. He was just dropping off invitations for tomorrow's ceremony. She held up the envelope and a small silver shovel. They're rushing everything. The groundbreaking was supposed to be next month. Because they know what they're doing, won't withstand scrutiny, Daniel said, checking that their evidence was secure. Once the FDA application is submitted with their proprietary compound, the source won't matter. We need to leave, Ellie stated firmly. The groundbreaking ceremony changes everything. How so? Marion asked. It's perfect, Ellie explained. Every important player will be there. Town officials, Nexus executives, media. Her eyes held newfound intensity. The ideal opportunity to expose everything at once. They ascended to Marion's apartment, where Ellie spread out a town map on the kitchen table. While Daniel organized their documentary evidence, she outlined a new plan. The ceremony will be held here. Marion indicated a cleared area at the edge of town, adjacent to the forest. They've already prepared the site. Construction equipment is in place. And these key players will all be present, Ellie confirmed. Mayor Harrington, the town council, Captain Preston representing the Ranger Service, Dr. Mitchell from Nexus. Marion ticked them off on her fingers, plus state representatives and regional media. Ellie's smile held grim satisfaction. Perfect. A soft knock at the apartment door startled them all. Marion peered through the peephole, then relaxed, opening the door to admit Lisa Chen. The journalist looked rain-soaked but alert. Marion, she greeted with evident relief. I wasn't sure I'd find you home. She stopped short upon seeing Ellie and Daniel. You're here too. Good. Saves time. What have you found? Daniel asked immediately. Lisa pulled out her phone, displaying documents. Corporate filings linking Nexus to a shell company called Forest Pharmaceuticals. Same company that tried to survey this land 15 years ago? She glanced at Ellie, right after your departure. Confirmation of the connection, Daniel murmured. There's more, Lisa continued. Nexus has FDA approval fast-tracked for a new pain medication. Revolutionary non-addictive compound. Stock prices are already climbing on speculation. And the application? Ellie asked, already anticipating the answer. Submission scheduled for Monday, 3 days from now. Lisa's expression was grim. Once filed, the source material becomes a trade secret, protected information. So the groundbreaking ceremony isn't just symbolic, Daniel concluded. It's the final stage of their timeline. After that, they'll have legal protections in place. Exactly. Lisa set her phone on the table. Tomorrow morning is our last chance to stop this. Once their application is filed, the legal battle becomes nearly impossible. The four gathered around the table, reviewing their collective evidence. Photos of illegal harvesting, town documents showing permit violations, corporate filings revealing the 15-year conspiracy, environmental data demonstrating irreparable harm to protected species. It's compelling, Lisa assessed professionally. More than enough for my editor to run the story. But publication takes time, which we don't have, Ellie finished, her decision made. So we bring the evidence directly to the ceremony. Force a public confrontation they can't control or deny. Marion picked up the ceremonial silver shovel, studying its polished surface. They expect this to be a celebration of progress, a photo opportunity. Instead, it will be their exposure, Daniel said quietly. As night deepened outside, they refined their plan. Lisa would arrive as press, positioned to document everything. Marion would attend as invited staff. Ellie and Daniel would approach from the forest edge at the critical moment. When preparations were complete, Ellie stepped to the window, looking out at the town that had exiled her. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or final defeat. Either way, her days of hiding were over. "You should rest," Marion said gently. "Both of you. I've prepared the spare room." As Daniel followed Marion's suggestion, Ellie remained by the window, watching the occasional car pass on the rain-slicked street below. Somewhere in town, her adversaries slept peacefully, unaware that the ghost of their past crimes was already among them. 15 years, she whispered to the darkness. Tomorrow, it ends. Morning broke clear and bright, the storm leaving behind washed skies and mud-slicked streets. By 9, the ceremonial site buzzed with activity. Workers arranging chairs, technicians setting up sound equipment, Nexus representatives directing placement of corporate banners. Lisa arrived early, press credentials prominently displayed, camera and recorder ready. She positioned herself strategically near the podium, nodding professionally to other journalists while surveying the gathering crowd. Marion took her assigned seat in the front row, wearing the appropriate expression of civic pride while scanning the forest edge where Ellie and Daniel would appear. The evidence was divided among them all, redundancy ensuring that even if one was stopped, the truth would still emerge. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mayor Harrington approached the podium, his politician's smile gleaming as bright as the sun on. The row of silver ceremonial shovels displayed on a velvet-draped table. "Today marks a new beginning for Oakridge," he began, voice projecting confidence and prosperity. "For too long, our town has struggled while others flourished. Today, that changes." The crowd, mostly townspeople hopeful for economic revival, applauded dutifully. Behind the mayor, a row of dignitaries nodded approvingly. Town council members, Captain Preston in dress uniform, Dr. Mitchell and other Nexus executives in expensive suits. In partnership with Nexus Pharmaceuticals, we are breaking ground on a facility that will bring jobs, innovation and prosperity to our community. Harrington gestured expansively. "From this soil will grow not just a building, but a future." As the mayor continued his practice speech, Marion noticed movement at the forest edge, Ellie and Daniel in position, waiting for the perfect moment. She touched the folder in her lap, containing copies of damning town documents. Dr. Vanessa Mitchell, head of research at Nexus Pharmaceuticals, will now say a few words about the revolutionary medical advances this facility will enable, Harrington announced, stepping aside. Dr. Mitchell approached the microphone, her corporate poise unmistakable. "Thank you, Mayor Harrington. Nexus is proud to bring cutting-edge pharmaceutical research to Oakridge. Our work here will develop treatments for chronic pain without the addictive properties of opioids, a true medical breakthrough." Lisa moved closer, recorder running, capturing every word of what would soon become evidence. "The unique properties of botanical compounds found in this region," Mitchell continued, "have demonstrated remarkable efficacy in preliminary trials. Our proprietary extraction and synthesis process, extraction from protected species in violation of environmental law." A clear female voice interrupted from the back of the gathering. All heads turned. Ellie stood at the edge of the seated area, Daniel beside her. Though 15 years had passed since most townspeople had seen her, recognition rippled through the crowd immediately. "It can't be," someone whispered. "The Woods woman," another murmured. "Eleanor Harmon," a third voice identified, heavy with disbelief. Ellie moved forward with measured steps, her presence commanding despite simple clothing. 15 years ago, I discovered what certain plants in this forest could do. I was researching sustainable cultivation. You chose destruction instead." Captain Preston rose from his seat, hand moving to his sidearm. "This woman is trespassing. I'll handle this." "Like you handled Ranger Mercer?" Daniel stepped forward, causing gasps from the crowd. "Your tragic accident victim seems to have made a miraculous recovery." Preston froze, face draining of color as he stared at the ranger he'd left for dead. Mayor Harrington recovered first, forcing a laugh. "Friends, it seems our ceremony has attracted some confused individuals. Security will escort them." "Perhaps before they do," Lisa cut in, professional demeanor unshaken as she held up her recorder, "you'd care to comment on these documents showing Nexus has been harvesting endangered plant species from protected forest areas, or the town council minutes, approving permits that violate federal environmental protection laws?" Marion stood, opening her folder. "Or these records showing the connection between today's pharmaceutical breakthrough and the false accusations against Dr. Harmon 15 years ago. The same compounds, the same location, the same people involved." The carefully orchestrated ceremony dissolved into chaos. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Town council members exchanged alarmed glances. Dr. Mitchell leaned toward Harrington, whispering urgently as her corporate facade cracked with panic. Ellie approached the podium directly, calm amid the storm. "I've lived in the forest you're destroying for 15 years, documented every species, every ecosystem, watched as you systematically harvested rare plants to extinction." She placed her research journal on the podium. "Everything Nexus claims to have discovered is detailed here, with one critical difference." Her voice carried effortlessly to the assembled crowd. "My research focused on sustainable cultivation, preserving the source rather than destroying it for profit." Captain Preston moved suddenly, drawing his weapon. "That's enough. You're under arrest for trespassing and interference." "I wouldn't," Daniel warned, holding up his phone. "This live stream is already going to state environmental agencies and federal authorities. Add false arrest to your crimes if you want." Preston hesitated, trapped between panic and rage. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, abandoning the mayor to save herself. "I was unaware of any permit violations or illegal harvesting. If such activities occurred, they were authorized by town officials without Nexus's knowledge of their illegality." "That's a lie!" Harrington exploded, composure shattering. "You knew exactly what we were doing. Your people identified the plants, marked the areas for clearing." Lisa moved closer, recorder capturing every damning word of their mutual accusations. The crowd watched in stunned silence as years of deception unraveled before them. Ellie stood unmoved, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the frantic denials and blame-shifting erupting around her. In 15 minutes, what would have been Oak Ridge's triumphant new beginning had transformed into a public exposure of its darkest secrets, all because a woman they had cast out as a witch had returned, not seeking vengeance, but armed with truth. The ceremonial site descended into controlled chaos. Reporters fired questions from all directions, while cameras captured the unfolding drama. Mayor Harrington's attempts to regain control were drowned out by the clamor of accusations and revelations. "I need to make a statement," Dr. Mitchell declared, her corporate training kicking in as she tried to distance Nexus from the scandal. "Nexus Pharmaceuticals has always operated within the bounds of—" "Save it for your lawyers," Lisa interrupted, recording device steady in her hand. "We have documented evidence of Nexus personnel supervising illegal harvesting operations in protected areas." Captain Preston moved toward an exit, attempting a quiet retreat. Daniel stepped into his path. "Going somewhere, Captain?" His voice carried across the gathering. "Perhaps to destroy evidence at the ranger station." Preston's face contorted with rage and fear. "You don't understand what you're doing, Mercer. This project means everything to Oak Ridge. The town is dying without it. So you'd kill the forest instead." Daniel countered. "Betray everything the Ranger Service stands for." From the edge of the crowd, a uniformed figure stepped forward, a state environmental officer accompanied by 2 rangers from the neighboring county. "Captain Preston," the officer announced formally. "We received some very interesting footage this morning. Enough to justify an immediate investigation." Preston's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. "You're making a mistake. All of you." "The mistake," Ellie said quietly, was thinking the forest had no defenders. As Preston was escorted away, Mayor Harrington made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. This is all a misunderstanding. The permits were properly issued. The council approved everything. Under false pretenses, Marion countered, holding up council minutes. These documents show Nexus misrepresented the scope and impact of their operation. The council was deliberately misled. Council members began distancing themselves immediately, several approaching the state officials to clarify their involvement. The carefully constructed facade of unity crumbled as self-preservation took precedence. Lisa moved through the chaos methodically, capturing statements, reactions, and the gradual unraveling of the conspiracy. When she reached Ellie, who stood somewhat apart from the commotion, she held out a small USB drive. Every photo, document, and recording, she explained. Multiple copies, multiple locations, insurance. Ellie took the drive, studying the mundane black plastic that contained the vindication she'd waited 15 years to achieve. Will it be enough? More than enough for criminal charges against Preston and Harrington, Lisa confirmed. Civil penalties for Nexus, federal investigation into environmental violations. She smiled slightly. And one hell of a story. The state environmental officer approached, introducing himself as Director Sanders. Dr. Harmon, your reputation precedes you. Your research was groundbreaking before. Everything happened. Ellie assessed him cautiously, long-ingrained wariness not easily discarded. We've been monitoring the situation here for months, Sanders continued, but lacked concrete evidence to intervene, until this morning's footage and documentation arrived. Convenient timing, Ellie observed dryly. Sanders acknowledged this with a nod. Bureaucracy moves slowly, without irrefutable evidence, which you've now provided. He gestured to the forest edge. I'd like to see the affected areas personally. Assess the damage, document what remains. Before Ellie could respond, Dr. Mitchell broke away from a group of reporters and approached. Corporate mass now completely abandoned. Dr. Harmon, she addressed Ellie directly. A word in private? Ellie raised an eyebrow, but allowed Mitchell to lead her a few steps away from the others. Your research, Mitchell spoke urgently. The sustainable cultivation methods you developed. They're exactly what Nexus needs. 15 years too late, Ellie replied coldly. Not necessarily. Mitchell glanced around before continuing. The company is facing disaster, stock freefall once this breaks. Unless we can announce a new direction, sustainable harvesting, local ecosystem preservation. With you as lead researcher, Ellie's expression remained impassive. Oh, you want me to save Nexus after everything you've done? I want to save the research, Mitchell countered. The compound works, Dr. Harmon. It could help millions of chronic pain sufferers, without addiction risks. For a brief moment, the scientist in Ellie responded to this appeal. Then her eyes hardened again. You should have thought of that before choosing extraction over cultivation, she said simply, turning away. Director Sanders approached again, this time with Daniel beside him. Dr. Harmon, we're organizing an immediate survey of the affected areas. Your expertise would be invaluable, Daniel added quietly. The northeast quadrant harvest has been halted pending investigation. But there's still the heart of the forest to protect, Ellie nodded. Decision made. I'll show you everything. As the group prepared to depart for the forest, Marion touched Ellie's arm. Are you coming back this time? Or disappearing again? The question carried 15 years of unspoken concern. Ellie glanced toward the forest, her refuge, her sanctuary, then back at the town that had once rejected her. I'm done hiding, she said finally. The truth can stand in the light. Behind them, Mayor Harrington was being escorted to a police vehicle, still protesting his innocence. Dr. Mitchell stood surrounded by anxious Nexus executives, and the townsfolk of Oak Ridge watched in stunned silence as decades of secrets were laid bare before them. The ceremonial shovels, meant to break ground on a new facility, lay forgotten on their velvet-draped table. Instead, something else entirely had been unearthed. Truth long buried beneath lies and greed. 3 months passed with the changing of seasons. Summer's lush green gave way to autumn's first hints of gold and crimson in the forest canopy. In Oakridge Town Hall, a different transformation was underway. The special town meeting filled every seat, with residents standing along the walls. At the front, newly appointed Mayor Collins, formerly the town's high school principal, called the session to order beneath the framed town charter. Its 1887 founding document recently restored and prominently displayed. "Today, we vote on the forest conservation proposal," she announced. "Dr. Harmon will present the final recommendations from the Environmental Assessment Committee." Ellie approached the podium. Her appearance subtly changed. Still dressed simply, but her hair was neatly trimmed, her posture more open. 3 months of reintegration had softened some of her harder edges while leaving her essential strength intact. The committee recommends establishing a protected conservation zone, encompassing 60% of the forest, she began, indicating a map displayed on a screen. This includes the northeast quadrant, which has already begun natural recovery following the halt of harvesting operations. The audience listened attentively, a marked contrast to the suspicious whispers that had followed Ellie during her first weeks back in our town. The remaining forest areas would permit sustainable activities, responsible recreation, limited harvesting of non-endangered species, and scientific research under strict oversight. She gestured to another section of the map, including a botanical research center focusing on cultivation rather than extraction. Mayor Collins opened the floor for discussion. Several residents approached the microphone, asking thoughtful questions about economic impact, implementation timelines, and environmental benefits. The conversation reflected a community reckoning with past mistakes and cautiously embracing a different future. From his seat in the back row, Daniel watched with quiet satisfaction. His own journey had paralleled the town's transformation. After testifying against Captain Preston in the ongoing criminal case, he had declined reinstatement to the local ranger service, instead accepting a position with the State Environmental Agency. His assignment, helping establish protection protocols for the newly designated conservation zone. The town council voted unanimously to adopt the conservation plan. As the meeting concluded, residents gathered in small groups, discussing implications and opportunities. Ellie found herself surrounded by townspeople, some offering congratulations, others asking questions about specific aspects of the proposal. Quite a change from the last time you stood before the town. Marion observed when the crowd finally dispersed. "The town has changed," Ellie replied, gathering her materials. "Or perhaps just remembered what it once valued." She glanced at the framed town charter, its elegant script pronouncing Oakridge's commitment to stewardship of the natural bounty with which Providence has blessed our community. Words written by founders who had understood the forest's true value. Outside Town Hall, Daniel waited, leaning against his truck. "Congratulations, Dr. Harmon, or should I say Director Harmon?" Ellie smiled slightly at the reference to her new position, heading the Botanical Research Center, funded partly by settlement money from Nexus Pharmaceuticals' environmental violations. "The real work is just beginning," she said, climbing into the passenger seat. "Re-establishing endangered populations, documenting recovery patterns." "Always the scientist," Daniel observed as they drove toward the edge of town. "Even after everything that happened." "Perhaps because of everything that happened," she corrected. "Science was never the problem. How people used it was." They passed the site where the Nexus facility would have stood, now designated for the more modest research center. Construction would begin in spring, with strict environmental safeguards and community oversight. The criminal cases against Mayor Harrington and Captain Preston continued moving through the courts, with both men facing significant prison time for corruption, fraud, and in Preston's case, attempted murder. Their fall had prompted soul-searching throughout the community, confronting how economic desperation had enabled ethical compromises. Daniel turned onto the forest road leading to Ellie's cabin. She had chosen to maintain her home there, though no longer in isolation. 3 days each week, she taught botany and environmental science at the high school. Weekends often found her guiding townsfolk on educational hikes, reintroducing them to the forest many had taken for granted. Lisa's article won a national award, Daniel mentioned as they drove. Environmental Reporting of the Year. She earned it, Ellie acknowledged. Taking our scattered evidence and weaving it into a compelling narrative that people couldn't ignore. The journalist had become an unexpected ally, helping Ellie navigate the media attention that followed the exposure of the Nexus scandal. The story had attracted national interest, highlighting issues of environmental exploitation, corporate accountability, and rural economic pressures. As they neared her cabin, Ellie gazed out at the forest, her sanctuary, now also her legacy. The healing had begun, both for the woodland and the community that depended on it. Trees would regrow, plants would recolonize disturbed areas, and eventually, even the scars of exploitation would fade beneath nature's patient reclamation. Town meeting at 10, high school class at 1, research planning at 3. Daniel recited her schedule for the following day. You've become a very busy recluse. Ellie's smile held a complexity that only those who knew her story could fully understand. Not a recluse anymore, just someone who remembers what it means to live in the forest rather than simply taking from it as they arrived at her. Cabin now expanded with a small laboratory addition. The setting sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light across a community finding its way back to balance. Led by the very woman it had once cast out, spring arrived with gentle persistence, coaxing new growth from soil that had known too much disturbance. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at the ceremonial site, a full turning of seasons. The morning sun filtered through fresh leaves as Ellie knelt in the clearing at the heart of the forest, carefully examining the blue starflowers that had begun their annual bloom. The mother colony is expanding, she noted, making entries in her research journal. Approximately 12% increase in coverage since last documentation. Beside her, Daniel photographed the delicate purple-blue blossoms for the Conservation Project's records. Nature rebounds when given the chance. With a little help, Ellie amended, gesturing to protective markers establishing a no-entry zone around the sensitive habitat. The boundaries were respected now, patrolled by rangers trained to understand the forest's ecological significance rather than seeing it merely as a resource to be managed. Their work complete, they followed the hidden trail back toward the edge of the forest. The path was becoming slightly more defined, not from overuse, but from the regular passage of researchers participating in Ellie's Sustainable Botany program. The university partnership is confirmed, Daniel mentioned as they walked. 3 graduate students starting next month. Ellie nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. After years of solitary research, she would have young scientists to mentor. Ensuring her knowledge extended beyond her own lifetime, they emerged from the forest near the newly constructed research center, a modest facility of natural materials designed to blend with its surroundings. Solar panels provided power, rainwater systems reduced impact, and the laboratories featured advanced equipment for studying plant compounds without destructive harvesting. Inside, Marion was leading a tour for elementary school children, explaining the center's work with patient enthusiasm. The children listened with surprising attention as she described how certain forest plants could help create medicines. "And here's the special part," Marion was saying as Ellie and Daniel entered. "Instead of taking all the plants from the forest, Dr. Harmon figured out how to grow them right here." She gestured to a climate-controlled greenhouse visible through interior windows. "That way, the forest stays healthy, and we still get the benefits." The children's questions revealed genuine curiosity, a new generation potentially growing up with different values than their parents had demonstrated. When the tour concluded, Marion joined Ellie and Daniel in the main laboratory. "The school board approved the expanded environmental curriculum," she reported happily. "Starting next fall, every grade will have forest ecology components. Education is essential, Ellie agreed, setting down her field equipment. The next generation needs to understand what's at stake. The center's door opened, admitting Lisa Chen, now a familiar face in Oak Ridge. Her investigative series on the Nexus scandal had expanded into a book exploring rural environmental justice issues, with the town as its central case study. "Just got word," she announced without preamble. "Sentencing is complete. Preston got 8 years for corruption, fraud, and attempted murder. Harrington 5 years for his role. The news was received with solemn acknowledgement rather than celebration. Justice had been necessary, but the town's healing required more than punishment of the guilty. And the FDA approval?" Daniel asked. "Interesting development there," Lisa replied. "The new management at Nexus is pursuing the pain medication using the sustainable cultivation methods. They've credited Dr. Harmon in their applications." Ellie's expression remained neutral. She had declined Nexus's offers of employment or consultation, preferring independence. However, she hadn't opposed their use of her research principles. The potential benefits to patients outweighed personal grudges. Later that afternoon, they gathered with a small group of townspeople at the northeast quadrant, where the most extensive damage had occurred. What had been a muddy expanse of stumps and tire tracks was now sprouting with new growth, some natural, some carefully planted during community restoration events. Mayor Collins addressed the assembled volunteers, who came equipped with seedlings and planting tools. "Today marks our 6th replanting day. Thanks to everyone who continues to show up for this important work." As the group dispersed to their assigned sections, Ellie supervised the planting of rare species, ensuring proper spacing and soil conditions. Daniel worked alongside teenagers from the high school environmental club, demonstrating correct techniques. At the day's end, as the sun began its descent, Ellie stood alone at the edge of the restored area. From her pack, she removed a small clay pot containing a carefully cultivated blue starflower seedling, the first successfully grown outside its natural habitat. The result of years of research. Daniel joined her carrying 2 shovels. "Special placement?" She nodded, leading him to a spot she had selected carefully, a location with the proper soil composition, light exposure and protection from wind. Together, they dug a small hole, gently transferred the seedling, and tamped the soil around its delicate stem. The moment carried weight beyond the simple act of planting. It represented the possibility of harmony between human intervention and natural processes. "Will it survive?" Daniel asked. "Knowing the species' notorious difficulty in transplantation, I believe it will," Ellie replied, her fingers lingering briefly on the tiny leaves. "It's stronger than it looks." As they gathered their tools to leave, the setting sun illuminated both the newly planted seedling and the woman who had once been known only as the Woods Woman, both now integrated into a community that had learned, painfully but genuinely, the true meaning of stewardship.